So I've always felt very strongly about it, and I've been watching very carefully what others have been doing. And for me, over the last few years,
Royal chaos has erupted inside Buckingham Palace after shocking reports revealed that one of Queen Camilla's grandchildren was caught stealing Princess Kate's priceless jewels. The scandal has thrown the royal household into turmoil, sparking outrage and disbelief across the nation. But the real bombshell came when Prince William personally stepped in, issuing his final verdict on the matter. So, what drove this shocking act, and how did William choose to handle it? This is where silence met justice. The vanishing sapphire. It began in silence, not with breaking news or a scandal on the front pages, but with something much quieter and far more unsettling. Absence. A single, missing object, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet heavy with meaning. The sapphire brooch, once resting close to Princess Diana's heart and later passed to Kate Middleton by Prince William, had vanished, without warning, without trace, without explanation. To the world beyond the palace gates, it might have seemed like an ordinary jewel, another gleaming accessory in the endless royal collection. But to those who understood its story, it was something sacred. That sapphire was more than a stone. It was a symbol. It carried the warmth of Diana's compassion, the ache of her loss, and the promise of her legacy reborn through Kate. Every glint of blue was a reminder that the past still lived, quietly, beautifully, in present. When it disappeared, the stillness inside Kensington Palace began to hum with unease. The air grew heavy with unspoken questions. Staff members exchanged nervous glances as they moved through the corridors, pretending nothing was amiss while their minds raced. The usual order and polish of royal life faltered, just slightly, in the shadow of something that couldn't be explained. Kate herself searched quietly, almost desperately, though she never let her distress show. Drawers were emptied, boxes overturned, memories replayed. Every possible place the brooch could have been misplaced was checked twice, and then again. Her fingers trembled slightly each time she lifted a jewelry case, only to find it empty. Yet she forced a calm smile whenever anyone entered the room. The Princess of Wales could not appear shaken. Behind closed doors, William noticed her silence. He knew her too well. The pause before her sentences, the long glances at the empty velvet box. He didn't need to ask what was wrong. The absence of that sapphire, the one he'd given her as a bridge between his mother and his wife, felt like a wound neither of them could see, but both could feel. Within days, the whispers began. Guards reviewed surveillance footage. Maids were discreetly questioned. Even trusted aides avoided eye contact, sensing that something sacred had been disturbed. The brooch had not been lost. It had been taken, and in a world where every movement was watched, every word recorded, no one could understand how. Outside the palace, the gardens bloomed as they always had. Cameras flashed at the gates. The world believed the royal family carried on untouched, poised, polished, perfect. But inside, the quiet loss of that sapphire had begun to unravel something much deeper than security or protocol. It stirred emotion. It disturbed memory, because in a palace built on appearances, even one missing jewel could whisper secrets no one was ready to hear and ignite a storm powerful enough to shake the crown itself. A single small jewel with a story far greater than its size vanished inside the palace. But what makes this jewel so powerful, and what unseen tension could its disappearance cause within the royal walls? Now let's delve into the hidden storm inside Kensington Palace. Whispers beneath the crown. From the outside, Kensington Palace looked like a picture of royal calm. The lawns were trimmed to perfection. The flower beds burst with color, and the royal guard stood tall and still under the afternoon sun. Photographers waited patiently beyond the gates, eager for a glimpse of the royal family, never suspecting that behind those grand walls, something was terribly wrong. The air inside the palace was different, quiet, but heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Kate Middleton, the Princess of Wales, moved through her day with the same grace that had long made her the people's favorite royal. She smiled at staff, attended briefings, and oversaw her usual engagements. But those who looked closely could see that something had changed. Her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. The warmth she carried like a quiet light seemed dimmed, replaced by a worry she couldn't quite hide. The missing sapphire brooch, Princess Diana's cherished jewel, later gifted to Kate by Prince William, had become more than a lost possession. It was a wound that words couldn't explain. To the world, it might have been just another royal accessory, one of many glittering treasures stored behind palace doors. But for Kate, that sapphire was sacred. It represented continuity, the bond between the late Princess Diana's legacy and her own path as the modern face of the monarchy. Its loss felt like something deeper had been taken, a thread connecting past, present, and purpose. William was the first to sense her distress. He noticed how she turned away from cameras, how her laughter faded quicker than before, how she avoided questions that touched too close to home. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the palace gardens, he asked softly, "What's wrong?"
Having been lucky enough to meet some of our country's amazing charities and organizations.
Kate paused for a long time before whispering, "It's gone." She didn't need to say more. The silence that followed spoke louder than any explanation. The palace moved swiftly. Security was doubled. Guards were questioned, and every inch of the royal apartments was inspected. Nothing, no signs of a break-in, no suspicious activity, no misplaced box or unlocked drawer. The sapphire had vanished, not lost, not misplaced, but gone. Then came the whispers. Among the palace staff, quiet rumors began to circulate, hushed exchanges in corridors, passing glances in the servants' quarters. But those closest to Kate sensed there was something far more delicate, more personal, behind the mystery. And so, while the palace gates remained still and serene, a hidden storm grew within, one woven with questions no one dared ask aloud. What had really happened to Diana's sapphire? Who had taken it? And why did it feel as though the loss carried more than jewels, perhaps the beginning of a deeper fracture within the royal heart itself? A missing sapphire is causing unrest inside Kensington Palace. But will it ever be found? And who could have taken it? Now, let's uncover the picture that shattered royal peace, the photo that shook the crown. It began with a single photograph, a harmless snapshot, or so it seemed. One lazy afternoon, a cheerful post appeared online, shared by an unsuspecting teenager who had no idea what storm she was about to unleash. In the sun-drenched garden of a country estate, Queen Camilla's granddaughter, young Lola Parker Bowles, beamed at the camera, her laughter frozen in time. But it wasn't her radiant smile that caught the world's attention. It was the shimmering sapphire brooch pinned neatly to her dress. The same sapphire once worn by Princess Diana and later by Kate Middleton, the Princess of Wales, a royal heirloom glowing with history, memory, and emotion. Within minutes, the image spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, tabloids around the globe plastered it across their front pages. Questions flooded the internet. How did a symbol of Diana's grace, passed to Kate as a token of continuity and trust, find its way to the chest of Camilla's granddaughter? Why was Kate silent? Why did the palace refuse to comment? Behind palace walls, calmness turned to chaos. The corridors of Kensington and Clarence House buzzed with whispers and hurried footsteps. What had begun as an innocent post was quickly spiraling into a royal nightmare. Kate, usually composed and reserved, was shaken. That brooch was more than just a jewel. It was a bridge to the late Princess Diana, a link between two eras of royal womanhood. Seeing it paraded outside her circle felt deeply personal, like losing a piece of herself. Prince William's reaction was quieter, but far more dangerous. His anger simmered beneath the surface, tightly contained, but unmistakable. To him, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal wrapped in sapphire and gold. Every photo of Lola wearing that brooch deepened the wound. And so came the confrontation, behind the heavy oak doors of Clarence House, where history has both begun and broken before. The atmosphere was thick with tension. William sat across from Queen Camilla, his jaw set, his tone sharp, yet measured. Kate stood by, clutching a printed photo of the image that had set the kingdom ablaze. "That sapphire was my mother's," William said slowly, each word deliberate. "How did it end up around your granddaughter's neck?" Camilla, calm but visibly defensive, insisted it must have been a misunderstanding, that perhaps Lola had borrowed it innocently, with no malice intended. But William wasn't convinced. The story felt too smooth, too carefully prepared. Kate didn't raise her voice. She only whispered, eyes glistening. It was meant to stay in the family, our family. When the meeting ended, nothing was the same. Invisible cracks had formed within the monarchy, and though the world outside still saw polished smiles, inside the palace, trust had quietly shattered. A piece of jewelry once worn by Princess Diana has now been seen on Camilla's granddaughter. But can she truly carry what it represents? And what legacy of Diana still lives within that jewel? Let's find out. Princess Diana, the compassion that crowned a commoner's heart. Princess Diana's compassion reached far beyond palace walls. She was driven by a deep, genuine interest in others, not by duty, but by empathy. Whether comforting the homeless, sitting beside patients in hospice care, or simply holding the hand of someone in pain, Diana radiated warmth that seemed to dissolve barriers. Her visits were often photographed, yet those who truly knew her understood she didn't do it for publicity. Hospital staff quietly revealed that she sometimes arrived unannounced in the evenings, away from cameras, just to spend time with patients who needed comfort most. When Diana entered a room, the atmosphere shifted. Her laughter, her lightness, and her sincerity lifted spirits in ways few could explain. She treated everyone, from royal guests to the humblest patients, with the same gentle respect. To her, kindness was not a royal duty, it was a human instinct. She once said, "Everyone needs to be valued," weren't just spoken. She lived them daily. Though she often struggled with the relentless scrutiny of the press, Diana also recognized the power of media when used for good. She turned cameras, once her tormentors, into tools for awareness. At a time when fear and misinformation surrounded HIV, Diana became one of the first public figures to shatter stigma. By openly hugging and touching people living with AIDS, she sent a powerful message to the world. Compassion cannot spread disease, but ignorance can. That single act of humanity changed global perceptions forever. Her courage extended beyond hospitals. In war-torn regions scarred by conflict, Diana found another cause close to her heart: the global campaign to ban landmines. She was horrified by the countless innocent lives, especially those of children, lost to hidden explosives long after wars had ended. In 1997, her walk through a cleared minefield in Angola became one of the most iconic images of her life. Wearing a protective vest and calm determination, she symbolized empathy in action. Many believe her advocacy played a crucial role in shaping the Ottawa Treaty, which led to the global ban on landmines. What set Diana apart was her humanity. She blurred the line between royalty and reality, reminding the world that true greatness lies not in crowns, but in compassion. People from every corner of the globe, from London to Los Angeles, saw in her something rare. A royal who understood pain, who listened, who cared. She became, not through title, but through truth, the people's princess. As one commentator beautifully said after her passing, after giving her time and property to causes ranging from AIDS treatment to the fight against landmines, her destiny was clear. She may never have been the Queen of England, but she will forever remain the queen of our hearts. Princess Diana's kindness turned royalty into humanity, making her the world's true queen. But now, her cherished jewel has reappeared on Camilla's grandchild. Will Camilla be able to defend her grandchild? Now let's dive into the confrontation behind closed doors. When loyalty, legacy, and betrayal collided at Clarence's house. Clarence's house had weathered its fair share of tension and whispered conflicts over the years, yet nothing had ever approached the intensity of what was unfolding now. Behind its stately locked doors, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken anger and restrained disbelief. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that history was quietly being rewritten in that very room. Seated at the polished oak table, Prince William's posture was rigid, his jaw set, and his eyes smoldering with a mixture of frustration and determination. Across from him, Queen Camilla maintained her usual composure, the surface calm of her demeanor barely concealing the irritation that flickered in her eyes like a hidden ember. Between them, Kate Middleton stood silently, her fingers lightly clutching a photograph of the sapphire brooch, the same one that had once belonged to Princess Diana.
Can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves.
Her eyes, bright yet weary, refused to look directly at anyone, as though the weight of the moment demanded her restraint. The silence stretched almost unbearably before William finally broke it, his voice deliberate and low, each word measured for maximum impact. "That sapphire was my mother's," he said, the name resonating with reverence and unspoken grief. "How did it end up around your granddaughter's neck?" Camilla's reply was cool, almost practiced. She suggested that perhaps young Lola had borrowed the brooch innocently, that no harm had been intended, and that it was merely a gesture of affection. But William's eyes, sharp and unwavering, revealed his disbelief. He could see through the carefully chosen words, the polished phrasing, and the deliberate calm. It was too neat, too rehearsed, a veneer attempting to mask the truth. Kate's gaze fell to the photograph in her hands. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight no shout could match. It was meant to stay in the family, our family. The words trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the depth of the betrayal they conveyed. For a long moment, silence reclaimed the room. But this was no ordinary quiet. It was the kind that spoke volumes, the kind that marks a boundary drawn and a shift that cannot be ignored. Every glance, every breath, seemed loaded with meaning. When the door finally closed behind them, the unspoken verdict hung in the air. A clear, invisible line had been drawn across the monarchy. Loyalties, trust, and power had subtly yet irrevocably shifted, and everyone in that room understood that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Camilla faced the confrontation but couldn't defend her granddaughter. Is there more to the story of the missing jewel, and is it enough to serve as proof? Now, let's uncover the letter that broke the silence and revealed the truth behind the royal mystery. Truth from the unseen. Weeks passed, and the storm that had shaken the royal household slowly began to settle. The tabloids moved on to new scandals, the public's outrage dimmed, and the palace, ever polished, resumed its quiet routine. To the outside world, the royal family appeared calm once more, but beneath the surface, the tension still lingered, a quiet unease that refused to fade. Then, one crisp morning, a simple envelope arrived at Kensington Palace. It was unmarked, handwritten, and addressed to the Princess of Wales. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, perhaps another letter from a well-wisher or admirer. But inside lay a revelation that would reopen every wound the family had tried to close. The letter came from a young student, barely out of her teens, who had volunteered briefly at one of Queen Camilla's charity events. Her writing trembled across the page, uncertain yet brave. She apologized for intruding, but insisted she could not remain silent any longer. What she had witnessed weeks earlier had weighed too heavily on her conscience. She described how, at the end of a quiet charity function, one of Camilla's senior aides had approached Lola Parker Bowles with a small velvet box. The aide had smiled warmly and said it was a special gift from her grandmother. The girl hadn't thought much of it then, until she saw the news headlines, the photograph, and the uproar that followed. Now, realizing what she had seen, she felt compelled to speak up. That single paragraph turned speculation into certainty. The sapphire brooch had not been borrowed by mistake, nor misplaced in confusion. It had been given, deliberately and quietly, passed from one side of the royal family to another, as though its legacy could simply be rewritten. Prince William read the letter in silence. Once, twice. His face hardened, not with anger this time, but with something far more dangerous: resolve. The truth had found its way to them, not through scandal or investigation, but through the courage of an ordinary girl who valued honesty more than royal protocol. He handed the letter to Kate, and as her eyes scanned the trembling words, the weight of it all settled in. What was once pain turned to clarity. They both understood what this meant, that within the grandeur of the monarchy, even among those who shared their bloodline, trust was a treasure more fragile than any crown jewel. The palace never released a statement. The tabloids never learned the truth. Officially, the matter was buried, sealed behind gold-trimmed doors and quiet smiles. But from that day on, William and Kate began to distance themselves. They stepped back from certain gatherings, certain dinners, and certain faces, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. Some bonds, they realized, are meant to be guarded, especially when others have already tried to steal them. A secret letter exposes a royal betrayal, turning silence into truth. But how will this betrayal be faced? Could Camilla be made to face the consequence of her action, or will the truth be quietly buried? Let's delve into the details. The Queen, who lost the crown of hearts. For Queen Camilla, the fall did not come with shouting headlines or public humiliation. It came in whispers, soft, cold, and cutting. She had faced the world's wrath before, weathered decades of scorn and scandal, and somehow emerged standing beside King Charles, wearing the crown that once seemed impossible to claim. But this time, the storm was not outside the palace gates. It was brewing within. There was no public outcry, no media frenzy this time. Instead, there was silence, the kind that feels heavier than words. Prince William's distance was no accident. It was measured, deliberate, and absolute. His once cordial tone turned formal, his visits rare, his trust withdrawn. Kate, graceful as ever, said little, but her silence spoke volumes. Her glances, once warm, were now unreadable. When the two crossed paths at official events, every polite smile carried the weight of something broken that could never be repaired. Even King Charles, steadfast in his loyalty, could feel the shift. Though he tried to hold the family together, he sensed the subtle change in the air. A quiet turning of hearts. The people, once cautiously accepting of his wife, now looked upon her with renewed doubt. The memory of Princess Diana, reignited by scandal, hovered like a shadow the monarchy could never quite escape. Inside the gilded walls of the palace, Camilla found herself increasingly alone. The phone rang less. Invitations arrived later, if they came at all. Her diary, once filled with engagements and appearances, now had empty spaces she didn't know how to fill. She spent more evenings in her private drawing room, staring into the soft glow of the fire, listening to the silence echo through corridors that had once buzzed with power. And then there were the photographs, old press clippings, magazine covers, the ones showing Diana, radiant and untouchable, wearing that same sapphire brooch, the one now tainted by controversy. Each time Camilla's eyes fell upon them, she felt the weight of the past pressing down. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore. It was a symbol of trust betrayed, of history repeating itself in its cruelest form. The Queen, who once defied public opinion, now found herself haunted by it. Gossip she could ignore, headlines she could outlast. But this was different. This was personal. The quiet coldness of her stepson and his wife carried more power than any tabloid could print. And in that silence, Camilla finally understood something she had never had before. Royal power wasn't sustained by crowns or titles, nor by the grandeur of ceremonies.
I've been actually trying to keep quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century.
It lived in the hearts of the people, and in the respect of those closest to the throne. For the first time, she realized that she no longer possessed either. Queen Camilla now faces the consequences of her actions. But will the sapphire brooch ever return to its rightful owner? And how will this single scandal shape the future of the monarchy itself? Now let's unravel how one photograph redefined the royal future. The rise of the silent heir. It came without warning. No breaking news, no official statement, and no royal ceremony. Just a single photograph quietly released by the palace on a cool autumn morning. At first glance it seemed ordinary. The Prince and Princess of Wales, standing in a sunlit garden with their children. The golden leaves framed them perfectly, their smiles soft and genuine, as if the chaos of the outside world had melted away. But for those who looked closer, there was something far deeper hidden in that stillness, a quiet power. Pinned gently to Kate's elegant dress was a sapphire brooch that shimmered with more than just beauty. It was Diana's brooch, the same one that had once symbolized both love and scandal, loss and legacy. Once at the center of whispers and heartbreak, it now gleamed again under the sunlight, restored to its rightful place, reclaiming its meaning. The palace said nothing. The photo came without a caption, without an explanation, without a fanfare. But it didn't need words. Its message was stronger than any press release, a message of dignity, forgiveness, and quiet strength. It was a reminder that in a world drawn to noise and scandal, grace could still speak louder than anger, and love could silence even the loudest rumors. Within minutes, the image spread across the globe. It lit up social media, filled TV screens, and trended across continents. Yet the reaction was not one of shock. It was admiration. People didn't see tension or revenge. They saw unity, calm, and resilience. Kate's serene expression and William's steady presence told a story the world instantly understood. The storm had passed, and peace had taken its place. For the first time in a long while, the monarchy felt steady, not because of royal protocol, but because of human truth. The sapphire, once a symbol of betrayal, had become something greater. A bridge connecting Diana's memory to the new generation. It spoke of healing, of legacy reclaimed, of love that refused to fade. Inside the palace, the shift was impossible to ignore. Conversations grew quieter, glances lingered longer. Between William and Camilla, words were few, but meaning was heavy. Something unspoken had changed, the balance of power, the tone of respect. It was no longer about who wore the crown, but who earned the people's hearts. Camilla, once the steady force behind King Charles, now felt overshadowed by William and Kate's quiet strength and serene presence. That single photograph spoke louder than any argument or confrontation could. It declared the shift of power and influence. In its subtle, undeniable way, it revealed who truly held the hearts and trust of the people, the new generation of royalty. And so, without a single word, William and Kate reclaimed not just a jewel, but a legacy. They turned scandal into symbolism, loss into renewal. The world saw not rulers bound by titles, but heirs defined by grace. The crown might still rest on another's head, but the heart of the monarchy now beat quietly, powerfully, in theirs. What do you think about William's response? Could it signal the future direction of the monarchy? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.